Hello, anyone tuning in, and welcome to my daily worship. A bit later today than I planned, but such is a Tuesday. We start today with our with you twos, with or without you, not mine, not our, you twos, with or without you. See the storm set in your eyes, see the thorn twist in your side, and I'll wait for you. Sleight of hand and twist of fate, on a bed of this she makes me wait, and I'll wait without you, with or without you, with or without you. Through the storm we reach the shore, give it all but I want more, and I'm waiting for you, with or without you, with or without you. Oh, I can't live with or without you. And you give yourself away, and you give yourself away, and you give, and you give, and you give yourself away. Hands are tied, my body bruised, she's got me big, nothing to win and nothing left to lose, and you give yourself away, and you give yourself away, and you give, and you give, and you give yourself away, with or without you, with or without you. Oh, I can't live with or without you. With or without you, oh, I can't live with or without you, with or without you. Scripture reading today comes from Esther, chapter 8, verses 3 through 17. This is kind of the continuation of the story from a week ago. Then Esther spoke again to King Ahasuerus. She fell at his feet, weeping and pleading with him to avert the evil design of Haman the Agagite and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. The king held out the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther rose and stood before the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have won his favor, and if the thing seems right before the king, and I have his approval, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, son of Hammedatha, and the Agagites, which he wrote, giving orders to destroy the Jews who are in all the provinces of the king. For how can I bear to see the calamity that is coming on my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?" Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to the Jew Mordecai, "See, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he plotted to lay hand on the Jews. You may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king, and seal it with the king's ring. For an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked." The king's secretaries were summoned at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and an edict was then written, according to all that Mordecai commanded, to the Jews and to the satraps, and to the governors and the officials of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, and also to the Jews in their script and their language. He wrote letters in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed them with the king's ring, and sent them by mounted couriers riding on fast steeds bred from the royal herd. By these letters the king allowed the Jews who were in every city and to assemble and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, with their children and women, and to plunder their goods on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. On the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of the writ was to be issued as a decree in every province and published to all peoples, and the Jews were ready on that day, or to be ready on that day, to take revenge on their enemies. So the couriers, mounted on their swift royal steeds, hurried out, urged by the king's command. The decree was issued in the citadel of Susa. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king, wearing royal robes of blue and white, with a great golden crown and a mantle of fine linen and purple, while the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews there was light and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict came, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a festival and a holiday. Furthermore, many of the peoples of the country professed to be Jews, because of the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Next song is called Women of God. It's a recent hymn written by Gladys G. Moore. Sent to share in the treasure of God's good pleasure, ambassadors for Christ and world in Women of God, created hope where there's despair. We're sent to lift our voices for those with few choices, to advocate for justice for the poor. We're sent to bind up the broken, to break silence with words spoken. Break silence with words spoken, to preach God's kingdom, call God's reign in joy. Women of God, created, chosen, and called from every nation, tribe, and tongue. Women of God, created, chosen, and called to sing until all songs are sung. We praise the God who made us, who named and claimed us as priests and servants of our God. We'll work as sisters together, baptism in sweat. Baptism is our tether, until God's whole creation is restored. Kind of a processional, celebratory song. Sorry for a few of the mistakes in there. It just has the lead, not the full notes. Our second reading is from Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. And I'll acknowledge that I think this is one of the, if I'm correct in my reading, I believe Howard Zinn is indeed a white man. However, I think that this, so it's kind of breaking our, mold here. And yet I believe this text is, shall we say, subversive enough to count. This comes from the first chapter in this book, in his discussion of Columbus and the discovery of America. My point is not that we must, in telling history, accuse, judge, and condemn Columbus in absentia. It is too late for that. It would be a useless scholarly exercise in morality. But the easy acceptance of atrocities as a deplorable but necessary price to pay for progress, in parentheses, Hiroshima and Vietnam to save Western civilization, Kronstadt and Hungary to save socialism, nuclear proliferation to save us all, that is still with us. One reason these atrocities are still with us is that we have learned to bury them in a mass of other facts, as radioactive wastes are buried in containers in the earth. We have learned to give them exactly the same proportion of attention that teachers and writers often give them in the most respectable of classrooms and textbooks. This learned sense of moral proportion, coming from the apparent objectivity of the scholar, is accepted more easily than when it comes from politicians at press conferences. It is therefore more deadly. The treatment of heroes, Columbus, and their victims, the Arawaks, the quiet acceptance of conquest and murder in the name of progress, is only one aspect of a certain approach to history in which the past is told from the point of view of governments, conquerors, diplomats, and leaders. It is as if they, like Columbus, deserve universal acceptance, for as if they, the founding fathers, Jackson, Lincoln, Wilson, Roosevelt, Kennedy, the leading members of Congress, the famous justices of the Supreme Court, represent the nation as a whole. The pretense is that there really isn't such a thing as the United States, subject to occasional conflicts and quarrels, but fundamentally a community of people with common interests. It is as if there really is a national interest represented in the Constitution, in territorial expansion, in the laws passed by Congress, the decisions of the courts, the development of capitalism, the culture of education, and the mass media. In quotes, history is the memory of the states, wrote Henry Kissinger in his first book, A World Restored, in which he proceeded to tell the history of 19th century Europe from the viewpoint of the leaders of Austria and England, ignoring the millions who suffered from those statesmen's policies. From his standpoint, the peace that Europe had before the French Revolution was restored by the diplomacy of a few national leaders. But for factory workers in England, farmers in France, colored people in Asia and Africa, I want to mention that this book was written in, I believe, 1980. Nonetheless, I would like to amend that and amend his statement to say people of color. people of color in Asia and Africa, women and children everywhere except in the upper classes. It was a world of conquest, violence, hunger, exploitation, a world not restored but disintegrated. My viewpoint in telling the history of the United States is different, that we must not accept the memory of the states as our own. Nations are not communities and never have been. The history of any country, presented as the history of a family, conceals fierce conflicts of interest, sometimes exploding, most often repressed, between conquerors and conquered, masters and slaves, capitalists and workers, dominators and dominated in race and sex. And in such a world of conflict, a world of victims and executioners, it is the job of thinking people, as Albert Camus suggested, not to be on the side of the executioners. Thus, in that inevitable taking of sides which comes from selection and emphasis in history, I prefer to try to tell the story of the discovery of America from the viewpoint of the Arawaks, of the Constitution from the standpoint of the slaves, of Andrew Jackson as seen by the Cherokees, of the Civil War as seen by the New York Irish, of the Mexican War as seen by the deserting soldiers of Scott's army, of the rise of industrialism as seen by the young women in the Lowell textile mills, of the Spanish-American War as seen by the Cubans, the conquest of the Philippines as seen by Black soldiers on the Luzon, the Gilded Age as seen by Southern farmers, the First World War as seen by socialists, the Second World War as seen by pacifists, the New Deal as seen by Blacks in Harlem, the post-war American Empire as seen by peons in Latin America, and so on to the limited extent that any one person, however he or she strains, can see history from the standpoint of others. My point is not to grieve for the victims or to denounce their executioners, those tears, that anger cast into the past, to plead our moral energy for the present. And the lines are not always clear. Let me see, I wanted to see how far I wanted to go. I didn't mark it as well as I should have. I'll just close here. And the lines are not always clear. In the long run, the oppressor is also a victim. In the short run, and so far, human history has consisted only of short runs. The victims themselves, desperate and tainted with the culture that oppresses them, turn on other victims. I don't want to invent victories for people's movements, but to think that history writing must aim simply to recapitulate the failures that dominate the past is to make historians collaborators in an endless cycle of defeat. If history is to be creative, to anticipate a possible future without denying the past, it should, I believe, emphasize new possibilities by disclosing those hidden episodes of the past when, even if in brief flashes, people showed their ability to resist, to join together, occasionally, to win. I am supposing, or perhaps only hoping, that our future may be found in the past's fugitive moments of compassion, rather than in its solid centuries of warfare. We now turn to prayer, so please join me if you are the praying type. God, who always chooses the side of the people over power, the oppressed over the oppressor, compassion over control, turn our senses to witness your power in our shared efforts of care and survival. Remind us that we are not made for conquest, but to care for your creation. Help us understand the world from all perspectives, sharing your preferential option for the poor and the marginalized. Remind us that we cannot begin to change the world until we witness it as it truly is. Amen. We close today with the hymn from the ELW, Evangelical Lutheran Worship, number 538, titled Enviados soy de Dios. And we'll be singing this one in the original Spanish. Enviado soy de Dios, mi mano desesa para construir con él un mundo fraternal. Enviado soy de Dios, mi mano desesa para construir voluntad. Los ángeles lo son, enviados a cambiar tu mundo de dolor por uno nuevo. Deja tocarlo a mí, hacerlo realidad. Ayúdame, Señor, a hacer tu voluntad. Los ángeles lo son, enviados a cambiar el mundo de dolor por un mundo mejor. Vas a tocarlo a mí, hacerlo realidad. Ayúdame, Señor, a hacer tu voluntad. Los ángeles lo son, enviados a cambiar un mundo de dolor por un mundo mejor. Deja tocarlo a mí, hacerlo realidad. Ayúdame, Señor, a hacer tu voluntad. There we go. Thank you for joining me today, tonight, whenever you're watching this, and have a good night.